right. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to our Conversations for Change, DIAC 2025, Building Generational Wealth. My name is Nadia Gandhara. I'm the Senior Director of Racial Equity Strategies at United Way, and really grateful for everyone joining us this evening. Conversations for Change is actually one of my favorite events. It's a quarterly hosted series where we bring together community experts, partners, and others to discuss pressing community issues and think about ways we can all take action. At United Way, we're working side by side with community to build an equitable future for everyone. We focus on ensuring people have access to quality education, enough to eat, and a safe place to call home. We invest in and advocate alongside communities with a racial equity lens, amplifying voices and elevating issues that affect communities of color. We aim to spark learning, connection, and action so that together we can create real and lasting change. This event is brought to you by DIAC, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Action Committee at United Way. It is a staff-led, staff-driven group that shapes and drives United Way's culture, systems, and processes, practices, really centering equity and people. Tonight's conversation reflects DIAC's commitment to fostering learning, action, and dialogue around equity, and it wouldn't be possible without our sponsor. So thank you to Pacifica Law Group for supporting our evening's event. Throughout the evening, we invite you to submit questions. We are going to be using a platform. There's a QR code on the screen, and you can use your phone to scan that code and start to submit questions or comments as we go through the evening's conversation. When we get to the latter part of the panel, there will be open Q&A, and we'll be pulling questions from this, as well as if you put up stickies earlier on one of the poster boards, we'll be pulling from those as well to ask our panelists. Before we continue in the program, I want to take a moment to ground us by acknowledging the land that we're on. On the next screen, you're going to see United Way's land acknowledgement. I won't read it word for word, but I do want to say United Way of King County acknowledges that we work on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples. United Way itself has benefited from the water, air, land, and other resources on Coast Salish territories as we work to build an equitable future for everyone. In 2020, United Way launched the Indigenous Communities Fund in response to the disproportionate impact that COVID-19 had on Native communities. But this fund was more than a crisis response. It's a long-term commitment. The fund continues to provide flexible, trust-based funding to Indigenous-led organizations, acknowledging that they are best positioned to know where and how resources meet the needs of their community. By supporting this fund, we aim to rebuild and create new and trusted relationships to correct historic imbalances in how philanthropy has engaged and or ignored Native communities. In this way, we hope to move beyond words and into action, honoring our land and through creating meaningful investments and accountability. We invite you to reflect on how each of us can advocate, invest, and build relationships in a way that truly honor the Indigenous peoples whose land we occupy. And now I'm honored to introduce our moderator for tonight's panel. Emily Portillo is the Senior Manager of Bridge to Finish program, as well as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Action Committee co-chair. Please join me in welcoming Emily.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you to the Wing Luke Museum for hosting tonight's event. We are honored to have this incredible group of leaders and visionaries and change makers in this room tonight. This is not just an event, it's the start of the movement, one that will redefine the economic opportunity in King County. For over a century, United Way of King County has partnered with community to meet the immediate needs of families, helping to ensure they have a safe place to sleep and enough to eat. While we stand by the importance of this work, we've also witnessed firsthand how systemic inequities have trapped generations of our neighbors in seemingly endless cycles of poverty, despite our county's vast wealth, which includes being ranked 24th nationally among the highest income counties in the US per capita income. It's also home to 8 Fortune 500 companies, which comprised more than half of the state's GDP in 2023. So, as you can see, there's a stark reality about income inequality in our county that is evident in wages, home ownership, business ownership, and just to name a few examples around wages. For white individuals in King County, they earn an average of $120,000 annually, while Black individuals earn just over half that at $65,000. When it comes to home ownership, we know that 62% of white families are homeowners compared to 28% of Black families. And so we have a real call to action, and is a big reason why we've put together this event today. We know that homeownership is not only the primary driver of generational wealth in our nation, but a creator of emotional security for families and economic stability for communities. We see addressing this inequity as our call to action and the cornerstone of our next big initiative known as the Bridging the Wealth Gap campaign. And so through this campaign, we aim to raise $30 million over the next 5 years with the hope of unlocking $100 million in capital and ensuring families furthest from opportunity can own homes and businesses. We see this campaign as a movement to accelerate economic mobility through increased homeownership and successful small business startups. This is critical to the future economic well-being for everyone in both our local and broader community. And so I'm really excited because we have a panel conversation today that will be focused on our new campaign, the Bridging the Wealth Gap. We've invited 3 panelists, which in a conversation that will sure to be engaging and compelling. So I'd like to welcome our panelists to join me. And so I'll first welcome Edwin Rios, our United Way Senior Director of Community Investment and Economic Mobility. Okay. And then second, please welcome Corbett Moses-Lee, the Community Reinvestment Plan Managing Director at the Washington State Department of Commerce. And then lastly, please welcome Kathleen Hosfield of Homestead Community Land Trust. Okay. See if I can, ooh, fancy. Okay. And then Edwin, if you can kick us off by sharing a little bit more about United Way's approach to addressing the region's income and housing disparities with our Bridging the Wealth Gap.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'd actually like to start out by kind of posing a question for us to think about. We're calling this the Bridging the Wealth Gap campaign. But what is wealth? You know, when we say wealth, what do we mean by that? What might first come to mind as we try to answer that question might be financial wealth, right? What investments we have, or stocks, equity in home, if we have one. It might be considering the lack of that financial wealth that at our current moment. But let's ask about it a little bit different. What is the point of having wealth? What does that allow us to do and accomplish and achieve? How do we acquire wealth? And I think when we start to ask that a little bit differently, expand that definition, we start to see that, you know, there are other ways to answer that. Many of the communities and organizations that we have already partnered with on this campaign and will continue to partner are answering that question very differently. Many of them, when we've spoken to them, answer that question by talking about the social capital, the social wealth that they have within their community, the networks, the connections that they all have built to support each other. they also talk about the lived experience, whether that's a formal education or traveling or just those lessons that we learn through life. And also the health, our general well-being. And arguably that's the whole point of having wealth. It's not for us to look at our personal financial statement and be, yay, we've got money there. That should accomplish something. I mean, we know when we've looked at the data that, some of the research that has been done shows that when someone owns their own home over a long period of time, some chronic illnesses can be reduced by almost 50%. I mean, that's significant. That's our health and well-being. And I think as we've answered that question ourselves on this campaign, it's important to keep that in mind, because what we're trying to do has to be transformative. There's, the wealth gap didn't happen overnight. It's in a way designed that way. There are multiple reasons that I don't have 5 minutes to go into all it, but y'all can all imagine the different components that go into what has created that gap. And ultimately what we need to think about is how do we transform that conversation around wealth. Our focus is going to be on wealth building through small business and home ownership. There's going to be important components of ecosystem grants, where we're going to be supporting the community organizations directly to continue to provide technical assistance and other kinds of supports to prospective homeowners, to small business owners. And also, we're planning to create a loan guarantee fund, primarily for the small business side. And again, without going to the weeds and technical aspects of a guarantee fund, basically it's a type of insurance. There are and have been existing models of loan guarantee funds, and I've actually used some of those in my previous jobs I've held at other community development organizations. And what we're trying to do is we don't just want to provide an insurance for lenders to take more risk. We want them to start to redefine risk and how they think about that. Because traditionally, right, as a lender, when they approach a question of risk and look at collateral, they see, okay, if this person doesn't repay us, what can we go seize or liquidate, worst case scenario, to cover whatever losses we have. That's not really good for the lender, to be honest. Lenders don't want to do that. That's definitely harmful towards the borrower, because that's taking back assets that they have, that wealth. And also, we're not transforming anything. We're, if anything, perpetuating a type of kind of extractive financial model. And so what we want to encourage lenders to do is, what if instead of collateral, financial capital as collateral, what about that social capital? We actually have organizations that we are already working with and intend to partner, that don't look at credit score, that don't look at what financial assets you have that we could liquidate if something happens. They look at the community. What's that community around you, your connection to them and their connection to you, because that ultimately is addressing that risk component for the lender of seeing, okay, there's something behind this small business, and it's also valuing something that traditionally lenders don't value. You don't really put a dollar sign on social capital. And so I'm probably past my 5 minutes. I can go on, but I don't want to take away your time. But I think just kind of as a brief overview, that's fundamentally what we want to do, and are really committed to having these conversations around what systems change really looks like in this space.
Great. Thank you, Edwin, and really appreciate those insights you shared around how wealth looks differently depending on the individual and the communities. Corbett, can you please share a little bit more about your work at the Washington Department of Commerce and how it supports bridging the wealth gap?
And thank you. I've been practicing trying to share this in a shorter version in 5 minutes. It's hard. I should also just start too with Commerce is last year they were an $8 billion agency. And the work of the Community Reinvestment Project is, I'm new to Commerce. I've been there a little over a year. And prior to coming to Commerce, let me tell you a little bit about the legislative kind of background. I'll do the short version. The account was created for the Community Reinvestment Account. It had 4 categories: reentry, legal assistance, violence prevention, and and economic development. And there's a line in that RCW that says that the funds must be distributed in collaboration with buying for organizations, and I think that's an important kind of note in terms of that RCW. And I just want to point to it real quick, that in terms of system change, when we're balancing power, there's been a lot of organizations that have operated paternalistically. We're going to serve those people. Don't worry. We're going to do the right thing. And balancing that power in terms of partnership with community, I think, has been some of the magic that we've been able to kind of practice in different ways. And it was a large, so legislature created this account, and then allocated $200 million to that account and said, before Commerce can spend any of this money, you have to go out with community and create a plan. And so there was about 19,000 or 18,000 folks that were engaged across the state. Not everyone, but there was a good amount of folks. In a very short period of time. I think that maybe there was like 4 months or something like that in terms of the engagement, 4 or 5, 6 months to actually write the plan. And then it took a while for it to get out. But the community came back and created the largest portion of that 4 bucket area was economic development. And the plan asked for some specific things. It asked to create long-term economic impact. It tried to define some of those characteristics of economic development in terms of increased income, increased wealth for target populations, and then described grants, loans, and access to financial coaching and those kinds of things to really get community engaged in that process. And so we've been able to, in a short period of time, distribute or actually have contracts and obligate out about $198 million of the $200 million across the state in a number of different ways. And I'm extremely proud of that work, and it's been a huge challenge and a huge learning for the state to do things differently. I think a part of the learning that we were able to experience in terms of economic development and addressing the wealth gap is that we're not going to social service our way out of this. For a lot of families, we got to think about things differently. We got to think about systems differently. We got to think about how we invest in things differently. And I think a lot of the work actually comes that we are learning is around system alignment. And there's a number of different great organizations and partners out there and system partners and thinking about the role that they play in this mix. We, some folks are familiar with asset maps in terms of a particular community. Asset maps are a good surface level indication of who's in the room or who's in the, but what we need to get better at is strategy alignment. Strategy alignment when it comes to workforce, philanthropy, banking and lending institutions, and actually think about how these different partners make up the ecosystem of the economy and how we leverage different pieces of that work. We've been able to test out some things in terms of how we do that, partnering with philanthropy partners across the state, partnering with workforce councils, partnering with buying for organizations for very large, contract amounts and being innovative and flexible in how we think about those things. And also dealing with internal challenges with Commerce in terms of contracting. How do we get better and how do we try to do things differently in terms of getting money out the door and not being a bottleneck. And so economic development has shown up a number of different ways. We've done We have 3,700 people so far that have been in employment workforce training programs across the state. I think we were just listed and acknowledged by the Harvard Workforce study that looked at other states across the country, and they pointed to Washington State as leading in this space this year in terms of getting some different outcomes with folks that were in poverty. 90%, they were looking at one focus group, 90% of those folks reached their self-sufficiency goal, moving people from under $10,000 a year to closer to $50,000 in terms of their exit wage. We've been able to do both small micro grants for folks to start their business or grow their business or be able to expand their business, especially when it comes to job creation. So we really did target or try to target in different ways where we had businesses of color that needed a piece of equipment. If they had a piece of equipment or some kind of capacity, it would allow for them to hire more folks or those kinds of things. So we prioritize that. There's a great story in Tacoma about a contractor. He needed an industrial air compressor. That got him a different bid. He was able to hire two more folks. And this is a real example of actually government investing in ways that actually create jobs and stimulate the economy. In other ways, we've been able to do larger, really creative loans to acquire and secure assets, or grants to acquire and secure assets for land, for home ownership, for developers of color that are building their first units and need pre-site construction dollars in terms of permitting so they can get to that construction deal. So it's been a phenomenal learning experience for us in a very short period of time, and there's a lot more that I think we have to think about. And I'd love to share even some thoughts about 2.0 later on, but I won't take up too much time. I'll switch up. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like a lot of what I gained in that was like try new things, opportunities to try new things, the power of our networks and making sure that you're engaging all players and then also being aligned with all of the players. Kathleen, would love if, as a longstanding community partner, if you could share more about the work that's happening at the Homestead Community Land Trust and how you're supporting Bridging the Wealth Gap.
Excited to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you. It's great to share this stage with this panel. I would start with how many of you heard of the physicist Ken Folding? He had a saying that I quote fairly often, which is, things are the way they are because they got that way. All right, this is a smart crowd. When people laugh, then they know what the problem is. Things are the way they are because they got that way because we made choices to create what we are experiencing. And the system that we have today is designed precisely to give us the outcome we are getting now, which is the wealth inequality that we're all here to address. And so I very much appreciate the land acknowledgement. We also center a labor acknowledgement. So not only is the wealth and prosperity of the United States in our beautiful region here built on stolen land, it is also built on forced labor and undervalued labor. So we have to acknowledge that these things have created an environment where certain people were allowed to own appreciating assets and to build intergenerational wealth, and some were not. When I first got to Homestead in 2014, I was introduced to a study by the Demos think tank organization where they had examined the racial wealth gap and said, what is the greatest contributing factor to that? They studied income, they studied education, and they studied home ownership. No surprise that I'm talking about it, that home ownership was the biggest contributor to building intergenerational wealth. But whole generations of families either were shut out of ownership entirely, or they began to own land and businesses and homes, and those were taken from them by predatory lenders So Homestead is a community land trust. Community land trusts were created in the Deep South in the late 60s and early 70s by civil rights leaders who were trying to create these economic opportunities, home ownership, business ownership, for people who were experiencing displacement due to political and racial discrimination. The precipitating event that started the first community land trust was that when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee tried to enroll Black people to vote, those Black sharecroppers who attempted to enroll to vote or resist segregation were forced off the land that they were farming. So they had no place to live and no way to make a living. The civil rights leaders came together, they created the model of the community land trust, which is collective ownership of land and individual ownership of homes, farms, businesses on the land. So folks own the home that's in the community land trust outright. They have a mortgage through a traditional bank, but they lease their land. And as a result of being in a program like ours, they're protected from predatory lending and some of the other forms of pressures that force them out of successful home ownership. So Homestead is a developer of homes. We build new homes or we rehabilitate existing homes. We go out and we get the money to subsidize the prices of those homes down to what is affordable to income qualified households, first-time home buyers, and the prices of homes that we target to sell at are in the neighborhood of $275,000, $285,000 up to $350,000-ish. So very low, below market for King County. Our role with the United Way campaign has been to, we did a study called the Closed Doors Report. When we're trying to make the case for some of these systemic changes like increasing home ownership, increasing business ownership, you know, they're lovely heartfelt stories, but we also believe in bringing data. So we did the Closed Doors Report, which is a Tableau dashboard and a written report that profiles the crisis of supply of affordable homes in, actually it's across the state. We started out just to focus on King County, that's where we worked at the time we did the first study. But we now have a Tableau dashboard where you can look at different income levels, 50 to 80% AMI, 80 to 100, and then 100 to 120, I think. I may have that wrong, but, and then to look at the number of homes in a county or down to the city level or to the legislative district level and say how many homes are available at any given point in time that are affordable to that income level. And the data shows there is an egregious lack of supply that is affordable to pretty much everybody. Unless you are a two-income tech family or high-wage earning family, you are locked out of homeownership in King County. And the study shows that this is true pretty much all over the state. There's a few counties and a few places where it's not the case, but by and large, across Washington state, people are locked out of homeownership by cost. It is still possible here in King County to find a $500,000 home and bootstrap up to that with down payment assistance. And there are some wonderful programs for people who are in families that have been prevented from homeownership due to discrimination, but they don't apply to everyone. And they certainly won't touch, they won't help anybody whose family wasn't living here prior to I believe the 1970s. So we contributed our report data to United Way as it was thinking about how do we address these systemic issues of wealth inequality and what are the levers we need to be pushing so So I'm excited about the mutual support that we're able to give each other. United Way is helping us address the supply issue, and we are creating homes that will be available for the folks who benefit from the homeownership portion of this campaign, so that they can actually access a home with the down payment assistance that is provided. So we're tremendously excited about the long-term change that this can create here in King County, and just look forward to continued rollout of the program.
Thank you, Kathleen, for really demonstrating how deeply rooted these inequalities are and giving us an example of a solution. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pass it to someone, to Nadia, to Mari, to support us in collecting some questions from the audience. Yes, is it possible to get the QR code again, please? Thank you.
Can I just share? I'm really excited about that loan guaranteed fund. I think that's an innovative way to leverage stuff. I'm excited to learn more about that. Mm-hmm.
We will kick it off with our first question. That would be for any of the panelists. How do I find resources for funding?
Yeah, well, so I guess I'll start. Well, definitely any of the state contracts would be on WEBS. And WEBS is also going to be doing a change. It's a statewide database for all of the procurement and grants and stuff that get put out. Some of the individual agencies do have their own RFP page, but they still post to WEBS. And now WEBS is going to be changing where you don't have to have a login to view the opportunities that are in there. That's an important shift that I think DES is making, Department of Enterprise Services. And so there's a lot of really great information. If you do log in and say what kinds of grants that you're interested in, what kind of opportunities you're looking for, it can kind of keep you up to date with those opportunities in your community. And there's definitely for the CRP, you can go to commerce.wa.gov/CRP. I don't know if that's the easiest way to say that, but it's the Commerce website /CRP, and that's our webpage for and there's a link on there where you can put in the email address, and if you want to get email information around the Community Reinvestment Project dollars and other related opportunities, you can put your email address in there, and we would include that when we let folks know.
Yeah, if you're a small business or thinking about going into business, my recommendation would be look up the Washington State Micro Enterprise Association website. I don't remember the exact URL, but it'll pop up. They have a really good portal where you go in there, you put down just some basic information that'll help you to filter exactly the type of support you're looking for. I mean, there are hundreds of organizations and resources that are part of the search portal.
We're not a funding provider, so I can't help with that question. Sorry.
Thank you. This next question is for Homestead. If someone buys through the Homestead program in the future, when they're able to buy the land too, will that become an option for them as well?
No, it won't. The community land trust model is collective ownership of land and individual ownership of homes, farms, and other assets that are on the land. And our intent is to remove land permanently from the speculative market, and by that mechanism and others to keep homes permanently affordable going forward. So we don't want to release land back out into the speculative market. That's sort of the opposite of the intent of our program.
Thank you. The next question from our QRC is, can you say a little bit more about how the Loan Guarantee Fund enables leverage of 20 million?
Yeah. So because the lenders we're going to be working with have loan capital to deploy, and one way to think about it is, without getting too in the weeds on like all the math part of it, let's say a lender, we have a structure where we're providing a 25% guarantee. And basically, if by us providing that 25% guarantee helps them to deploy X amount of dollars, basically we're looking at, in this particular example, a 4-to-1 type of leveraging, and potentially more. I mean, this is more hypothetical at this point. We are planning to have an RFP process in late July, early August, where we're going to look at proposals and start to get into some of the mechanics and exactly how it's going to work with the lenders, what it is that they need as far as the loan guarantee structure to start to deploy that capital in innovative ways and start to expand or try out the different kind of equity lending models.
Can I answer that question too?
Please.
That's just to simplify. So when a bank looks at providing a loan to somebody, they expect that entity to have 10 to 20% cash on hand as a risk mitigation. So if that organization has $10,000, that being 10% of $100,000, the bank will feel good about that $100,000 loan because the entity has that 10,000. So that's how, if you've got 80 million, what was it?
20.
20. Okay, so that
I mean, it could be 80.
how, do the math. That means that, okay, that's that cash liquidity that makes the banks feel good about lending, 10 to 20 times that amount too. So that's how it's leveraged.
And they're regulated for that. They actually can't take certain risk, right, at a certain level. And so they can't actually make that loan unless they have the cash reserves, right?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, they have, like with us, with Homestead, some folks have made it work somehow before we had the right cash equivalent. But they can't, you can't do that at scale.
Right.
What kinds of support will homeowners and businesses receive besides funds?
Well, I'll speak to the small business side. I mean, there are such incredible resources already available. The vast majority of the lenders we work with provide their own technical assistance to borrowers or are well connected to other technical assistance providers. And our intent is a lender receiving the loan guarantee would also be receiving a grant to help to support that ongoing technical assistance, because you need to have both, for sure. And
not necessarily connected, but just to kind of add to supports for, I think one of the models that I think a lot of communities are looking at is around integrated service delivery. So when you're helping a family be ready for an asset journey, there's a couple of things that you want to do. You want to help them increase their income if possible, decrease their debt, improve their credit score, and set on a goal in terms of an asset journey. What studies have shown is like you're much more likely to be successful if you have the income side connected with financial coaching too. And there's certain ways, and I think that now is really a good time for us to really have some really good conversations around what kind of, especially on the income side with the workforce changes that we anticipate will happen over the next 2 years. I think that's an important thing to pay attention to and watch with AI changing different industries. Not that those jobs will go away, but they certainly will change. And we want to make sure that our folks in Washington State have the skills to take on those new roles or in some cases, certain jobs might not be here. We don't expect them, and there will be new jobs. We need to be
I won't be building homes, I can
right.
guarantee you.
And so we also need a workforce that can build homes. We don't have enough workforce that can build homes, right? So we need skilled labor. We need to track. So the income side in terms of the job market, whether it's construction and apprenticeship trades, different AI, we need to pay attention to that so that we are setting people up for success, or at least scaffolding up that success. But I think on the service delivery side, in terms of the kinds of programs that we have, I think robust programs that do one-on-one financial coaching. We have enough. We have a lot of efforts that do financial literacy. When families need one-on-one coaching in terms of like what their specific situation is, and then how to scaffold, and not in a one-time transactional relationship, and an ongoing support to kind of coach people along the way, particularly when we're trying to move folks from crisis or vulnerable to crisis to that spectrum of thriving. There's different skill sets. There's different scaffolding that you might do in different levels of that, and we're not really that great at thinking about some of the upper tiered economic mobility strategies that you need to resource in terms of getting to wealth generation. What the system has done for a long time is really focus on those in crisis and in poverty. We get people one step up and their car breaks down or something happens and they fall right back down. We gotta pay attention to resourcing that full spectrum of services on the continuum, and we need systems that really connect the dots in terms of how we move folks forward. But so.
Thank you. Okay. Statewide and regional efforts seem focused on providing houses for those wanting to move to Washington. How can or do we prioritize housing for current community members?
So that's one for me. In our programs, we prioritize serving the communities in the immediate area around where we're building. So we have, in the city of Seattle, for example, we have community preference policies that say people who live in certain neighborhoods who are at risk of displacement or whose families have already been displaced, they, through reasons of gentrification or discrimination, they have the first opportunity to return in certain neighborhoods. The research shows that there have been whole classes of people that have been moved out of certain neighborhoods, and they should have the right to come back and purchase these homes. Homestead has criteria in our buyer selection process, and I believe this is true of other folks as well, where we score folks higher if you live in the area, have a job, your child goes to school, or you have ties to the neighborhood where the homes are, because we don't want to be building new construction homes and then have folks sailing from out of state when there's so many people locally that have been waiting for the opportunity to purchase a home. The closed doors report in King County, for the folks that we serve, who are the 50 to 80% AMI, these are your teachers, firefighters, healthcare workers, the people who take care of your parents in the assisted living facility. For every one home that is affordable and available, there are 400 people who are candidates for that home. At Homestead, when we have a home that comes up for sale, as many as 40 people will apply for the same home. So we have over 2,000 households on our waiting list. So we are going to be prioritizing the people who already live in our communities, especially the ones that live closest to the addresses that we're developing.
Thank you. And I cannot.
Can I add a
yes,
strategy
please.
component
Yep.
to that? Just another idea that I think that we are hoping to see some traction on is when people live in community that already own their home and have enough land space where they can build a DADU or ADU on their property, because that's a great way. And you know, when you think about the cost for even like the public system to build a 2-bedroom unit in Tacoma, and I'm sure it's way more expensive in Seattle. I think it was like $450,000 a couple years ago to build a 2-bedroom unit. Thank you. What if, you know, I mean, one idea is, and that we saw in other cities, is if you could stimulate that homeowner to build, if you do a $50,000 grant to build a unit that's, you know, maybe it's closer to 200,000, where you're saving money on the land. We're not, you know, and it's owned by community. So who does those builds, I think, is part of the equation in terms of targeting different community members, and particularly underrepresented community members. I looked at some research a couple years ago about, no, not research, it was census data. And it showed the average household size and alongside the average bedrooms that they had in their home. And the greatest disparity was with the Black community, and I believe, you know, the Hispanic community within that. So thinking about how we add more units to the mix and add more units, especially when somebody already has an asset for particular populations, I think that could be a strategy, that we're adding a household unit, an opportunity to generate, generational wealth, and we just need to build, and I think that's a good investment to do.
And there's a virtuous synergy between economic development, helping contractors come up the trail and get their businesses off the ground so that they can build housing. Mm-hmm. So, homeownership specifically.
Yeah. And to continue on that this exact point, it's actually something that's come up when we've been looking at, like, you know, where are we still seeing lending gaps? Mm-hmm. And one of those areas is the small businesses that are doing the construction for the small projects. They're struggling to get access to construction lending. Mm-hmm. Construction lending is very, very complicated. You know, sometimes banks or other institutions can struggle to see the scale. It's just, there's a lot of pieces to it. And we're seeing that in some of the conversations we've had so far, a loan guarantee could provide that last piece of the puzzles to start to unlock the capital that these small businesses need. So we're at the same time hopefully supporting those small businesses and helping to address the, you know, that we need to build.
Yes, there's a need for also systems change within the financial institutions, and you know, our friend Tanita Webb at Verity Credit Union is a really articulate about this, that there are systemic barriers within the financial services field that we also need to be working on. But in the meantime, we'll just provide the loan guarantees.
All right. Since we got since we started a few minutes late, we're going to do one more question to wrap us up. And this is from the audience. What are the key learnings from the COM reinvestment on simplifying funding for smaller BIPOC nonprofits? And will Commerce adopt these for future funding?
Can you ask that one more time?
Oh, absolutely. What are the key learnings from the COM reinvestment on simplifying funding for smaller BIPOC nonprofits? And will Commerce adopt some of these learnings for future funding?
Yes, we will adopt some of those learnings, and there's been a lot of those learnings. What we knew when we, initially when I first came to Commerce and talking to different providers, people were really surprised that their experience for a lot of grassroots folks or small nonprofits, that they're getting grants from philanthropy is a much different process than Commerce. Commerce has a reimbursement model, and we needed to figure out how we were going to address organizations and grassroots efforts that the funding was targeted and prioritized to, that could do the work but would come up with cash flow issues. And so what we did was talk to community foundations and United Way partners to be able to partner to front some of that money to grassroots efforts and partners that could do that work, and Commerce would reimburse them. That's a model that I think we were able to practice through the CRP that I think gave a lot of great opportunity for a lot of organizations and efforts that have been operating for years and never had received any funding at all. And so we had I think the CRP, out of 400 plus contracts, we've had the largest portfolio of brand new state contracted organizations. And even in saying that, I think that one of the other learnings that we need to know is that Commerce in the system is too big for that kind of work. It needs to be pushed down to the local level where people know what is really needed and can make those selections. And we need to trust community to kind of help us and lead in that space. And so that's what we're moving towards in terms of this next CRP 2.0, is taking those lessons learned. And even when if you're targeting a geography like Pierce County or King County or Spokane, wherever in the state, I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago with a group of CAP agencies, and somebody said, we appreciate the CRP dollars in our community, but before you just select a buying for organization to come serve our community, you need to check with our buying for organizations first, because we already had somebody doing that, and you selected somebody at a statewide level that came from outside of our community to serve, and it causes conflict. And so I think there's a lot of lessons that we learned in terms of what can we do to address the cash flow issue. How do we partner differently in thinking about that reimbursement model? How do we do deliverable-based contracting, which we also did versions of? How do we create early wins in contracts where maybe the first part of the contract is what is your plan and your approach and your engagement, and then you do those things and you get your first payment. So thinking about all of those different opportunities where we contract differently, but also just in general, Commerce is better at statewide contracting, and local contracting. We need to be able to resource local communities to design and the process that they need, and uncomplicate a lot of the things that the state requires. Some of the things that we put in those contracts are very long and sometimes are not appropriate for the work when it's a $10,000 or a $20,000 contract. And so yes, we've learned a lot. We plan to use those lessons learned and keep the feedback loops coming so that we can keep changing the way that we do business.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our panelists, Edwin, Corbett, Kathleen, for joining us this evening in this really engaging and meaningful conversation. Thank you all for also submitting your questions and just being here this evening in community to talk about this really important issue. As we move forward, definitely want to put on offer for folks to stay connected, engaged, plugged in. On United Way's website, we have a podcast, a blog post, a newsletter, and there's so much content there to continue the learning and also, again, finding ways that you can join the movement. And if you want to give to this initiative, to the work that's happening at United Way, visit us at uwkc.org/donate. And again, thank you for being a part of the Bridge the Wealth conversation this evening, and we hope to see you again soon.